Let's continue on programming this part, and we're going to focus on this pocket right here, which we're using for our G54 location. I'll go into Dynamic Mill, and I'm going to choose this area right here. Okay, so I'll select that for my machining region by selecting Machining Region, and then choosing, of course, Solids, and I'll just grab that edge right there. If I click OK and hit Preview Chains, you'll notice that I have this area outside here, and that is because it remembers the last setting, which was from outside. So I'll change this to Stay Inside and select Preview Chains again. Looks good, so I'll click OK. And I'm going to go right into the Tool section and make sure the number 10 is selected. Here, my comment is going to be called G54 Pocket. And in my cut parameters section, I'm going to make sure again that 0.05 is set to leave on the walls, and we can come back and clean that up later. I'm going to make sure for entry motion, helix is turned on, but for depth cuts, I'm going to turn it off because this is a pretty simple, light depth pass, and we can cut this in one pass without using depth cuts. From the linking parameters area, I'm going to go down and make sure the depth is set right to the bottom of this hole. Which makes sense, it's set to incremental 0 because that's exactly the area that I selected to machine in the first place. Let's click OK and investigate our toolpath results. So as you'll notice, we're helixing in from way up here, but we've already machined all this. If you recall, our last toolpath did exactly that. And this setting here is what I use often to let me only display the toolpath that's selected. So since this first toolpath is selected, that's what we see. Second toolpath is now selected, and that's all that we see. Depending on your settings, you may have a different color here for the actual toolpath. That's part of our config option. And as an example, if I go to Colors, Advanced Toolpath Display, you can see that my entry motion is set to this green color. So that is why the helix motion here is green, because my tool is entering using this motion here. So let's correct this wasted motion for the entry. Since we don't have to start up here and we can start down here, I'm going to go back into the parameters and change my top of stock. Currently it's set to absolute. I'm going to pick this point here. And now it knows that that's the top of my stock. So if I regenerate the toolpath from here, I should have less helix motion. And it should start helixing right in from a little bit above the part there. What I'll also do here is select both toolpaths at once by holding down the Control key. And this way I can look at the rapid motion between the toolpaths. This is important because if I only post out one toolpath, you won't see the linking between one toolpath and the next. Now I want to use this same toolpath to machine these open pockets. So I'm going to select just the second toolpath, right click and drag and copy it. And I'll also take this insertion arrow and move it down one. But now I can make modifications to this toolpath so it just machines these two open pockets. I'm going to go into the geometry section here, delete the original chain that I selected, and then add new ones. So right now I'm in loop. I'm going to make sure that partial is turned on. I'm going to go from here. And you'll notice the prompt here, select an edge to specify the end of the loop. That'll be right there. And the same thing over on the other side here. I'll start here and end here. So now if we hit preview chains, we have those two areas. And if I click on from outside and do the same thing, you'll see that it creates what we'd call an air region, or a region where there's an open part of the chain, here and here. This is very similar to how we did area mill before. However, with our current toolpath, this will be using dynamic toolpath motion. Let's click OK here and then go back into the parameters, because remember, we copied this toolpath, so we do need to make sure that things are set up properly for this new geometry. Just to double check, I'll go to depth here and I'll pick down here, and what I am expecting is 0 incremental because I selected that geometry as the geometry to cut. For now, let's click OK and regenerate this to see the toolpath motion, and we can always make adjustments to it later. Now, since we made a copy of this toolpath, let's do one last thing in here. Go into the Tools section and change the comment, because otherwise both of these toolpaths will have the same comment. So this will be called Open Pocket Rough. And we should be good. Now notice with this toolpath, the toolpath is not able to fit into this area, possibly for a few reasons. One is we might be leaving too much stock on the wall where the tool physically can't fit, or based on the fact that this is dynamic motion and it arcs in and arcs off, it has what we call a toolpath radius to those arcs. And that makes the toolpath a little wider than the tool itself. So because of that, we also might not be able to fit in here. And as an example, you can actually go into the parameters and adjust the toolpath radius right here. For now, this is going to be our roughing tool, so I'm actually going to copy this toolpath, and then we will make the next toolpath be a finishing or remachining toolpath. So I'm going to right click and copy and drag again. Copy after. We'll move our insertion arrow down. Now let's go into the parameters and do a couple other things. First of all, instead of using tool number 10, we'll use 5/16, which is a smaller tool. And we'll call this Open Pocket Finish. For my stock to leave on walls, let's change this back to 0, because we want to, of course, finish those walls. And here, let's go to the stock option here, and I'm going to turn on rest material, and I'm going to tell it to look at one other operation, and that operation would be toolpath number 3, which is the roughing for this open pocket and the other one on the other side. So let's click OK, recalculate that toolpath, and as you can see, our toolpath now comes in here nice to clean up this area. And again, it's not machining the area over here, because that was already done with the previous toolpath. And you'll also notice that the other side, the toolpath comes in and cleans up the wall, because of course the last toolpath was leaving 50 thousandths. So this toolpath cleans up toolpath number 3, and after these two we should have some really nice clean walls in these two open pocket features.